I worked at was open 24 hours back then. Due to my kid's school schedule, I would work overnight shifts so that I would be available to drop him off and pick him up. I would do a 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift every night during the day. I'd sleep, take care of my son, and work my second job. Some days I was exhausted a lot during this time in my life. It wasn't a great time. I had to do what I could to cover rent through this. Walmart was one of the bigger ones. It was a super center, not just a grocery store, so it had everything. It was one of the few open 24 hours around here. I think code changed that though. When I got there around 10 this one cold night, there was still a decent amount of shoppers in the store. A lot of people would come in for some late night shopping. As the hours would pass, it would of course quiet down tremendously. The late hours of the night would attract a lot of weirder characters, weirder than the usual ones during the day into the hours of the night. There was only one person working the front of the store, and he or she would be at the self-checkout registers. There were no regular registers open this late. There would also be a couple of stock workers on the floor, which was what I did. Then there would be a couple warehouse workers in the back, who I really didn't ever interact with. They did their own thing. And then there's just the night manager on duty. I was in the cereal aisle doing my usual stock work. I noticed a customer walk past the aisle. Then seconds later, he stepped back into view. At the end of the aisle, stopped and looked down at me. When I looked back at him, he started looking at the cereal. The guy had curly hair. I couldn't gauge his ethnicity. Honestly, he had a black backpack on. That looked like it was stuffed to the brim with God knows what. He awkwardly lingers in the cereal aisle for a minute, apparently looking at the granola bars. Then he came a little closer to me and asked me where the bread is. I pointed him in the right direction. He said thanks and slowly walked away out of the aisle. I watched him walk away, and he had a very noticeable waddle in his walk when he was out of sight. He was out of mind, though. The problem was that he wasn't out of sight for long. I was in the cereal aisle for quite some time, and I started noticing that every few minutes that guy would slowly pass by the aisle, looking down in this direction. He wasn't holding anything. He didn't get any bread. He just had on his big sketchy backpack. I started working faster just so I could finish this isley and move away from him. When I was done, I brought the empty platform back to the warehouse, where I grabbed another Ubo full of boxes. Ready to stock, I purposely picked an aisle far away from the cereal aisle. I was now in the chips aisle. This is also about 45 minutes after initial contact with that guy, so there should have been no way he was still here, but I was wrong. He found me. I was rotating the newer bags of chips behind the older ones on the shelf, and then I looked to my right, and that guy was at the end of the aisle creeping again. He still had nothing in his hands. This man had been creeping around the store for almost an hour. He then finally approached me, as I was dreading. I tried to look away until he started to speak. I don't remember word for word what he said, but basically, he said that he's been checking me out and he couldn't resist coming up to me, telling me how beautiful I am. I responded as politely as I could. I did a fake little laugh and said, "No, thank you, that's very sweet." He didn't stop there though. He asked a bunch of personal questions like where I'm from. I gave fake answers to everything. This guy absolutely Riri. And his breath was awful. I was genuinely repulsed. He asked for my number and I said, "I'm seeing someone." He said, "There's nothing wrong with us just being friends," to get him to leave me alone. I gave him a fake number. I then told him, "I really can't be talking to anyone while I'm working." He made some creepy comment before walking away, thinking he was all suave that he got my number, when in reality he was genuinely creepy, and I gave him a fake number. I thought that would be the end of it. Hours went by, and time felt like it was going in reverse. I wanted to go home. Then the only other stock were on the job at that hour suddenly walkie-talkie to me, saying there's some creepy-looking guy asking for me. I said, "Oh no," and then told her to tell him I left. I then basically made a bean for the employee lounge where I planned on hiding for a while. I made it to the lounge and then sat in one of the seats. Then the double doors opened and in came that guy. He looked at me and he looked angry. He yelled, "You gave me a fake number." I think I swallowed my gum out of fear. I said, "You can't be back here, sir." He then took off his backpack and plopped it on the table next to mine. He started unzipping it as he looked at me. That's when it was time for me to go. It was my only option at the time. I could have tried to locate the male warehouse workers in the back, or perhaps the manager, but there was no guarantee. Instead, I got up and ran past him, unconcerned about his attempt to grab my arm, which he failed at. As I raced through the store, I turned around to see that he was chasing after me. I sprinted to the front of the store and outside to my car. Upon reaching my car, I noticed the man slowly exiting the Walmart, seemingly preoccupied with something. He glanced over at my card, but by the time he realized it was too late, I was already on my way. I contacted the night manager to inform him about what had happened and express my discomfort with staying there tonight. I also warned him about the man with the mysterious backpack. Unfortunately, my manager informed me that I couldn't leave the place due to staffing issues. He threatened to call the police to ensure the man wouldn't return, and he informed me that I would need to return. He supposedly informed the police the next day about the individual and handed them the surveillance film, but I was insistent about not coming that night. He ultimately received the message and said he'd analyze the footage, but I needed to return the following night. I don't know what he was grabbing for in his bag, but he was the most terrifying individual I encountered while doing that job. I was 14 years old when this happened. There's a Walmart within walking distance of my house. Before I could drive, I would occasionally go there to buy clothes and other necessities. Sometimes I would go with my friend Emily, and other times I would go alone. The mall is part of the Walmart, but it's pretty awful now. Most of the good stores I used to frequent have closed down. Plus, I wasn't very well off when I was 14, so I shopped at Walmart because it was cheap. One night, I walked 15 minutes to Walmart with my AirPods in, and when I plugged them in, I became completely absorbed in my music. I was going about my business in the girls' clothing department of Walmart when I noticed a man next to me talking loudly, almost as if he were speaking directly to me. Anyone with even a passing awareness of social cues would know that when someone wears headphones, it's because they don't want to take them out. I took out my AirPods and I said, "Are you talking to me?" He said yes, he was this shorter man with grey hair who looked like 50. He had glasses and a clean-shaven face. He smiled and said, "Sorry, I didn't see your headphones." Sure, he didn't. He said he was just telling me how his daughter buys the same exact kind of jeans I was wearing. I had no idea why he was telling me this. But I'm a very polite person to everybody. I always have been so. I chose to be kind to him by laughing and saying, "Oh, that's funny." That should have been the end of an interaction that didn't need to happen. But of course, this wouldn't be a story if it was. I was still looking through this rack of tops. As the man kept trying to talk to me, he mistook my kindness for actual interest in talking to him. Clearly, he asked my age and I said 14, and his response was unsettling. He basically said, "Oh, what a great age. So mature, but still so young." He asked my name for some reason. I actually gave him my real name, and his response to my name was, "Wow, that's my favorite name for a girl." Next up, he asked what school I went to and around now was when I decided to start making things up. I said, "I'm actually not from around here. I'm just visiting my cousin." He couldn't let it go though, and he persisted, asking where I'm from. I said, "I'm from out of state," keeping it vague, but then he said, "I've seen you around here before. Are you sure you're not from around here?" I looked at him and tried to think of a response, but instead I ended up turning around and walking away from him. I was, for the first time ever, actually made very uncomfortable by a stranger. The way he said he'd seen me before made me feel as though he'd been watching me or paid attention to me in this Walmart before I went to buy the jeans I was holding at the front of the Walmart. Then I walked through the store to enter the mall. It was November or December, and they had just put up the Christmas decorations. So I wanted to walk through, and I also wanted to see if any new stores opened since my shopping in Walmart was cut short. I walked through the mall with really nothing catching my eye. I went into a Victoria's Secret, and while inside of there, I saw through the glass that guy from Walmart sitting on a bench in the mall outside of the Victoria's Secret. I left the store and started walking very quickly through the mall. When I turned around and saw he was now walking behind me, I started to panic and called my mom, asking her for a ride, because I was being followed by a man. Followed her suggestion and waited in a crowded supermarket. He approached the door and spoke my name in a creepy tone, apparently not wanting a lot of people to hear him. When I felt queasy, I approached the register and informed the clerk that a stranger was following me. I had no idea who he was. As soon as the guy saw that other shoppers had heard him, he turned and began to leave the mall. The cashier, who was likely no more than 20 years old, felt sorry for me. A couple even offered to stay with me until my mom arrived. My mom did arrive to the mall in the end, and I thanked the couple that had waited with me as we both departed. For a long time, I avoided going to the mall or that Walmart alone. I also stopped going back with friends. I hope the thug was arrested and is now off the streets.